Israel and Palestine, let's talk about it. These are my personal opinions. You don't have to agree with it. Number one, I don't think there is any true non-violent way to fight oppression. If you have been living in an open-air prison since 1948, your people are being killed on a daily basis, you are being ethnically cleansed, you're living in an apartheid state, you literally cannot leave, you're being squished in a small circumference of 2 million people, most of which don't even have access to clean water. There's going to be a point where these people fight back. Now, do I agree with the way it's gone down? No, I'm a socialist. I don't agree with war. What do people expect when you have been oppressing a group of people for decades upon decades upon decades? Almost every single day, there is at least one Palestinian in Palestine that is murdered, gunned down by IDF, etc. And no one ever talks about it. But the moment the other side sees any kind of bombing, any kind of threat, anything, any kind of retaliation, everyone is all up in arms saying, war is bad, we need peace, we need peace. My guy, this conflict did not start yesterday. This conflict has been going on for years, for decades. You do not fundamentally understand that oppressed people at some point will get up and fight back. You will not fully understand what is going on here. I pray for peace on both sides. I do. I really do. At the end of the day, you cannot poke a bear on a daily basis for 80 years and expect the bear to just look at you and smile. Yesterday, Israel agreed to a 5-hour ceasefire and to allow foreigners to exit while humanitarian aid would enter in through Gaza and the Egyptian border. Israel then started bombing the border for the fourth time after the ceasefire was agreed upon. This is the only remaining gate that is available for any kind of foreign aid to come in and out. There's thousands of truckloads of food and humanitarian aid that are piling up at the Egyptian border now, waiting for the approval, but they keep bombing it. They're more than likely going to render the area completely useless after all of these airstrikes. We're talking about humanitarian aid workers, trucks, people that are trying to leave Gaza, who are foreigners. Yeah, they all got stuck in the middle of this. Unbelievable. In Gaza, people are now forced to drink water that is contaminated with seawater and also sewage. Israel has stopped any kind of aid, food, water from going in, and since they control all of that, they haven't had access to water. They've become so desperate that they have started to dig wells in areas to the sea where they rely on salty tap water, and it's also been contaminated with sewage. They're so desperate for this water that they're filling up plastic containers and they're distributing it amongst their families because they don't have any other choice. Last night was the worst with airstrikes. Many houses were flattened, and authorities say that at least 2,700 people have been unalived, with more than 10,000 wounded. Furthermore, there's 1,000 that are missing, and they're expected to be under rubble. They've imposed a full blockade of any kind of food or water going in and out, and they are also gearing up for ground assault. Israeli troops and tanks have amassed the border, and they're waiting to basically strike. Days ago, Israel told 1 million people to evacuate from the northern part of Gaza to the southern part. They bombed all of the regions that they told the civilians to go to seek refuge. They bombed the areas of the southern Gaza where they told Palestinians to flee ahead of expected ground invasion, killing dozens of people on Tuesday in attacks it says are targeted at Hamas militants. People that fled from the northern part to the southern part were children and families, not Hamas. Israel told them where to go, and then they bombed the whole entire areas that they told them to go, in the name of fighting Hamas, of course. There's still no food, no water, fuel being delivered to Gaza. It's gotten so bad that the UN Human Rights Office is saying that they're seeing appalling reports that civilians who were trying to flee the southern Gaza were killed by military strikes. The toll of people expected to be under rubble rose 200 from last night, so now they're at 1,200. They've also unalived 7 paramedics and 16 medics and doctors that were on the job when they got bombed. There's a common thread where Israel tells people where to go and where to flee, and then they end up bombing the areas that they tell them to flee. Call it what it is. This is a genocide. This is a genocide. The senior State Department official that oversaw arms sales just resigned because of what's happening in Palestine. He told Huffington Post that he felt like he had to resign because he knew he could not push for a more humane policy within the US government. After 11 years, this is what he said: "It was clear that there was no arguing with this one. Given that I couldn't shift anything, I resigned." Apparently, more officials within the Biden administration are trying to encourage more Israeli restraint because they're concerned for Palestinian civilians, but they're also experiencing the same chilling effect, as in, like, they're not able to do anything about it. This man's resignation sent shock waves through the State Department on Wednesday. No one was expecting him to resign over this. He literally said one of the many differences was pending administration decisions to transfer lethal weapons to countries that abuse human rights. Absolutely insane. This is how Israel stops progressive candidates from advancing. Every single election cycle, the Israeli lobby group, otherwise known as AIPAC, funnels thousands of dollars into federal campaigns for politicians. But in the last election cycle, they ended up spending way more money than they've ever spent on both Republican and Democrat candidates. In total, for the election cycle in 2022 alone, they spent more than $13 million. Why would they spend so much money last year when they could have just spent this much money in other years too? It's because progressive candidates scare them. AIPAC created an organization called the United Democracy Project, and essentially they poured all of their money into the United Democracy Project to wash their hands and make the people not realize that it's actually Israeli lobby money, and then they funneled that against any progressive candidate that showed any kind of sympathy towards Palestinian people or their fight for liberation. In other words, Israeli lobby has a full grip on federal politics in America, and unfortunately, most people don't even know this. This is how you find out if your representative is paid out by the Israeli lobby. Israeli lobby's name is AIPAC, and this is how you spell it, AIPAC. You need to go on the website opensecrets.org. They post all of the fundings that all the politicians get, and they register. You can either Google AIPAC fund, or you can go on Open Secrets and type in AIPAC fund, but you have to go to the American Israeli Public Affairs page. The page should look something like this. Then you can literally filter it out however way you want, by year, by representative, whether it's Senate, whether it's Congress, but it will spell out everyone's funding either for that fiscal year or other years that you want to look during either the midterms or the general election. Have fun, guys! So it seems like internet services are being cut in Gaza right now because of Israeli bombardment. Palestinian telecom provider Paltel says that the internet service in the Gaza Strip has been cut off. This is incredibly worrisome because one of the only news stations that actually has journalists on the ground right now in the Gaza Strip is Al Jazeera. They wouldn't really let any journalists go into the Gaza Strip, and without internet, that information is about to be heavily cut, which in my opinion is what a country does right before they're about to do something really outrageous and they don't want there to be proof, or they don't want it to get broadcasted. So this is incredibly worrisome news, and I honestly, like, it gives me anxiety. This is not good. 23 years ago, this picture was taken where this Palestinian child is throwing rocks at this IDF tank. The picture went viral, and it was known as the David and Goliath moment. His name was Odeh, and he started skipping school to throw rocks at huge military tanks that the IDF would send. His parents tried to stop him. They tried to lock him in his room. They grounded him, but he would sneak out and he would still do this. So he was really scared of getting photographed because he was scared of his parents', punishment. One day when he was throwing rocks at the IDF tanks, the IDF ended up shooting him in the neck and he bled out on the ground. His friends could not grab him because he was too close to the tanks, and they were scared that they were going to get shot as well. So he ended up bleeding out in front of one of the tanks that he was throwing rocks at because the IDF shot him in the neck. So rest in peace, Odeh. Israel just bombed the Jabalia refugee camp, which people are now calling the Jabalia massacre. As of the time that I am filming this video, there are more than 100 civilians that were murdered in this bombing, but I'm sure that the death toll is going to climb. This is just one image. I can't show the video because I know it's going to get censored, but you get the idea. According to the health ministry, there are at least 20 homes that were completely destroyed in this bombing. Although the UN is calling for an immediate ceasefire, Netanyahu has no plans on doing a ceasefire anytime soon. More than 1 million people at this point have been displaced in Gaza. The death toll is more than 8,500 people. Jabalia was one of the largest of the 8 refugee camps in Gaza, and most of the casualties were both children and women. Disgusting. This is Rachel Corrie, an American activist, and in 2003, the IDF bulldozed over her body and crushed her and killed her. In an effort to stop the IDF from bulldozing homes in Palestine, she stood in between the bulldozers and the houses. She was only 23 and she was from Washington, and she went with the International Solidarity Movement, which is a non-violent group of activists who were, protesting against bulldozing and annexation of Palestinian homes. Although she was wearing a fluorescent jacket and she was was very peaceful. The IDF still bulldozed over her body, crushed her body twice, and then proceeded to drag her across the ground once she was dead. A couple weeks before her life was tragically taken, she emailed her mother, "I have bad nightmares about tanks and bulldozers outside our house and you and me inside. I'm really scared for the people here." Then Israel claimed that her death was just simply an accident. Rest in peace, Rachel Corrie. These pictures of Israelis signing bombs before they get sent off to Gaza started going viral, and I just want to talk about this news that came out years ago but still relevant. In Israel, it's actually common for people to watch bombs drop from a front row seat at a hill where they can actually see all of the bombs go off. Essentially, they take up all of their couches and they take popcorn and they celebrate the bombs dropping on Gaza as if it's firework. Old sofas, garden chairs, battered car seats, and upturned crates provided seating. On the hilltop, a swing has been attached to branches. They bring soft drinks and snacks and beer. They all hold up their smartphones and they record the explosions happening, and they also take selfies when it goes off too. This is a picture of a man who dragged up his sofa up the hill to watch these bombs drop off of Gaza. This is quite literally entertainment. Watching people in the Gaza Strip die is basically like fireworks. This is very well documented. A lot of people know about this. You just have to look to find it. This article is from September, but it's still relevant as to how the IDF treats Palestinian people. The IDF, when they do raids, will force Palestinian women to strip until they are fully unclothed. The IDF themselves said that they forced women to strip and do a search just to ensure that there was like no threat involving them. This is one of the only cases that actually made it to the news, but 5 Palestinian women were forced to strip by IDF soldiers in Hebron during a raid on an apartment building. It was 5 women from the family, and they were essentially forced to strip in front of each other. Once she stripped completely, they even threatened her that they were going to release a attack dog on her. I know we've all seen these IDF soldier thirst traps everywhere because they happen to put their prettiest, most attractive soldiers on social media to try to sway public opinion. But this is the reality of the IDF, not the thirst traps. Thousands of Palestinian Arabs and Jews fought side by side to fight against the Nazis. In a large chapter of forgotten history, 12,000 Palestinian Arabs volunteered to serve with the British military to fight Hitler. 134,000 Algerians, 73,000 Moroccans, and 26,000 Tunisians also joined the fight in forces against the Nazis. And all of the people from North Africa and Palestine who joined forces were actually fighting side by side with the Jews. There were also a set of Jewish volunteers who served in the British military and army later that was formed in 1946, where historians estimate about 30,000 of them were Palestinian Jews. I found out about this yesterday and I thought I really needed to make a TikTok about it, but let me know what you think. Leave a comment down below. The former U.S. Secretary of State and former CIA director just tweeted, "No ceasefire, destroy Hamas." So funny to me because people who say, you know, we need a ceasefire get painted as some sort of Hamas supporters, but then people just tweet this brazenly and there's no repercussions, nothing. This man held a position of power for many years in the American government, so if he has this kind of logic, I don't know what he has done to impact the Middle East, but I don't even want to think about it. Israel has reportedly indicted over 50 citizens for social media posts that have been deemed sympathetic to Palestine. Dozens have been detained and they also face criminal charges for this. It's also reported that students at Israeli universities are facing expulsion and disciplinary action for being sympathetic to Palestine. Others have been losing their jobs. This isn't necessarily new, but a lot of the rhetoric has been that Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. And in my personal opinion, I don't believe a democracy exists if you can't freely hold your own government accountable for things that they do that you don't personally agree with. This is how your activism has been making a difference within the Palestine movement. Netanyahu's son himself came out on his Telegram channel and criticized the IDF. Spain has vowed that they will work on recognizing Palestine as a state. The Spanish Prime Minister also said that he rejects indiscriminate massacre of Palestinians. The Canadian government came out and issued a notice saying that they are seeking prosecution for Canadian politicians that are complicit in what's happening in Gaza. Justin Trudeau might actually face prosecution for Israeli war crimes. Saudi Arabia hosted a summit and condemned Israel. To be fair, I do think this was more performative, but it's still a really big deal because America and Saudi Arabia are really close. Belize has also suspended all diplomatic ties with Israel and renews calls for immediate ceasefire. Lawyers in Turkey are planning to file a lawsuit at the ICC over Israeli war crimes. Brazil's Lula da Silva also called for a ceasefire, humanitarian intervention, and publicly voiced his support for Palestine. Though the situation right now is very sad and just disappointing, never forget that all of these countries speaking out in support of Palestine has never really publicly been a thing. Because of people like you who post, who listen, who go out in the streets and protest. So never forget that. Every 100 civilians that Israel kills, one of them are Hamas militants. Now it's estimated that Hamas has about 25,000 members, but we'll round up to 30,000 just for the purposes of this video. That means you need to kill 3 million civilians in order to take out all of Hamas. The current population in Gaza is a little over 2 million. So if Israel continues to do what they're doing, not do a ceasefire and try to take out all of Hamas, they're going to take out all of the civilians before they even get to taking out all of the Hamas militants. So this whole, we can't do a ceasefire until we take out all of Hamas, they know what they're doing because the ratio of the Hamas militants versus the civilians that they kill is not equal whatsoever. So at this rate, if they don't do a ceasefire and they continue to take out Hamas, every single civilian in the Gaza Strip will be dead. Malek Salman was only 17 years old when she was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Today, as a part of the prisoner swap, she was just released. Watch this video. I saw this tweet and I just want to read it out loud. A Palestinian woman speaking on Al Jazeera just now said they are receiving prisoners back unscathed and dignified, whereas ours are returning bearing broken limbs and evident marks of maltreatment and abuse. So who exactly are the terrorists in this situation? All of the hostages that have been returned from Palestine have been unscathed. They're healthy. They are literally writing thank you letters to the Hamas militants. Like, I'm not speaking about how you feel about Hamas. I'm just saying this is what they're doing. And yet we're receiving children back from Israel with broken bones. Today, the IDF forces killed 2 innocent children in the West Bank. This was Adam, a 9-year-old, and this is Basil, the 15-year-old that was shot. This happened when the IDF raided the Jenin refugee camp, according to local media. Israeli troops forced residents of the Damj neighborhood to leave their homes at gunpoint after massive destruction done by the Israeli weaponry. VCCTV footage caught the 9-year-old's murder. He was running in the middle of the street. The IDF shot him, and then his friend here actually dragged him across the street, and this is where this trail of blood is left, and he tries to kind of hide behind this car and flag someone for help. I can't show this on TikTok or else I'll get censored, but you can find this video online. These murders also don't count as breaking the ceasefire because it didn't happen in the Gaza Strip, it happened in the occupied West Bank. Rest in peace to the 2 children who were unjustifiably murdered. Let's talk about the extended ceasefire. Yes, I put ceasefire in quotation marks. Let me explain. Even though there's been the ceasefire in Gaza, the occupied West Bank has been getting raided by IDF soldiers on a daily basis. And although 150 prisoners were exchanged from Israel in order to get the hostages back, within the same 4 days that the 150 people were returned back to Palestine, 133 more people were arrested in the West Bank. On top of that, 2 children in the occupied West Bank were shot and killed by IDF forces yesterday. Their crime was playing soccer in the street. That was their crime. When we're talking about a ceasefire, yes, technically Gaza is under a ceasefire, but the occupied West Bank is going through it right now and no one's talking about it. This is not a conversation of apples to apples. This is a conversation of apples to oranges. Ultimately, the bar is in hell, so obviously a ceasefire is better than absolutely nothing, but this is not really a ceasefire. It's not. Truly live in a dystopian hellscape. Picture and video were posted around the same time. Past 2 days, southern Gaza has been getting carpet bombed. On the left is Israelis celebrating the Renaissance premiere. While they they were celebrating that, Motaz posted on his Instagram story that he is surrounded by Israeli tanks, hinting that if he dies, he tried his best as a journalist. These are two completely different experiences, but both of which are being marketed by an equivalent war. All I'm seeing is one side enjoying themselves and the other side dying from a genocide and ethnic cleansing. Itamar Ben-Gvir, Israel's Minister of National Security and Benjamin Netanyahu's right hand, is a literal sociopath. Let's talk about it. One of the reasons why he rose to notoriety is because he put up a picture of an Israeli mass murderer up for display. Baruch Goldstein was an Israeli American who went into a place of worship in Hebron in 1994 and massacred 29 Palestinians. He really had an obsession with Goldstein because he was recorded to dress up as Goldstein at a festival. He would regularly visit his grave. Like, this is all on record. He really admired Goldstein, which is a mass murderer. And Ben-Gvir had his picture displayed up for everyone to see. So extreme that even the IDF did not want him to serve in the military. Also regularly been documented to just pull guns on Palestinians. For example, last November, he went to visit the occupied West Bank area Sheikh Jarrah, and he just pulled a gun on people. Also been convicted of inciting racism, possessing a terror organization's propaganda, supporting a terror organization. He's also a part of the Kosh movement, which was outlawed in 1994 because it was vehemently anti-Arab and very far-right. Ben-Gvir and Netanyahu are both ultra-nationalist. I would compare them to someone worse than Donald Trump, but for some reason they're receiving support from both the right and left wing of American politics, which literally does not make sense to me. Life like before October 7th compared to now. Can you kind of speak to that a little bit?
So for the last 16 years, Gaza Strip has been under a siege. We only had electricity 8 hours a day. We were only allowed certain amounts of water, like in terms of quantity, in terms of volume. Spy drones never stopped circulating around us. Assassinations on a weekly basis didn't stop. Lack of jobs. There's like a 75% unemployment rate. And the vast majority of the population is a youthful population. However, education, literacy rates are amongst the highest in the world. The women especially are extremely empowered. Like every time the top 10 of those who graduate, like 7 or 8 are women or girls.
A bunch of women and children were reportedly just executed at point blank range by the IDF, and no one is talking about it. Israeli troops reportedly massacred forcibly displaced women and children sheltering at a school. How is this not breaking news? A man who arrived on the scene told Al Jazeera that we found dozens of dead bodies in classrooms. There is no signs of missiles or shells. All of those who were in the buildings were executed from point blank. Israeli soldiers opened fire on them. We need a statement from Joe Biden. This needs to be breaking news. Like, why are more people not talking about this? This is Al Jazeera cameraman Samir Abu Daqqa. Him and journalist Wael were hit with what is believed to be an Israeli targeted airstrike. For 5 hours, Samir was left to bleed on the street. According to Al Jazeera, Israeli forces did not allow medical staff to reach him in time, but they just left him in the street.